Dead Zone is the first adventure game on the Famicom Disk System, and as it turns out, adventure games prove to be the perfect genre for disc-based media. You've got a much higher graphics demand, while also being slow enough that the load times don't really interrupt the flow. We're actually going to see quite a few adventure games on here. Dead Zone is just the first, and actually the second. It's the second adventure game ever published on a Nintendo platform. The first was the cornerstone classic Portopia Renzok Satsujin Jiken, a game so important that its effects are still being felt today. Dead Zone, on the other hand, was forgotten pretty quickly. It is Sunsoft's debut on the Famicom Disk System, and in 1986, Sunsoft was in the middle of trying to improve their games by directly challenging the industry leaders. Atlantis no Nazo for Super Mario Bros., and, well, Dead Zone for Portopia. Sadly, Dead Zone is not based on the Stephen King novel. The plot of the game Dead Zone is about a space colony engineer, that is, a person who builds space colonies, and his space colony engineer girlfriend are going to get married. But she had one last job to do. Soon, all contact is lost with the colony that she was building. He flies off to rescue her, and then gets shot down. That's where the story begins, though all of that backstory is in the manual. There's no introduction here. You just wake up in a trash compactor that has your spaceship in it. Dead Zone is divided up into 4 chapters, which are referred to as floors. And if you save and reload your game, you go back to the start of that chapter. Dead Zone is extremely short as far as adventure games go. Most of the padding comes from having a really long verb list, which will slow you down as you try everything. The game has a big menu of verbs that you can choose from, like look, go, and open, something that you use weirdly often. And it's actually spread across multiple menus. You'll have to hit the B button to cycle through them. You pick your verb, then you're given a choice of things that you could target with that verb, and that's the way the interface works. The game is written entirely with Katakana, the Japanese character set that's mainly used for loan words. This has a consequence of making the text extremely difficult to read. Even for native Japanese speakers, it's tough. To give you some idea of how it might be in English, picture a paragraph written in all lowercase with no spaces. You can do it, it's just harder than it should be. Katakana was often used as the character set in early games like this, because its angular style makes it easier to render in low resolution. The one thing that people always remember about Dead Zone, or at least every person I saw who talked about Dead Zone mentioned it, is the sound. Not the sound effects as you're walking around and going through menus, but how certain characters have synthesized voices. You have a robot sidekick that you dig out of the wreckage, and you can ask for help as you progress through the adventure. Your girlfriend also has a digitized voice, as well as the villain of the piece, who I thought was you saying, "Nice." I think it's supposed to be saying Marie. One cute touch is in the end credits. It says that the other characters in the game were played by HVC22, which is Nintendo's part number for the Famicom Disk System. While Dead Zone is a very, very short game, I was done at the 40-minute mark. It does do a few interesting things to pad the running time. The good one is that most locations that you visit are more complex than just the visible screen. You'll need to look in all directions and up and down so that you can find what you need to. The bad one is that after you complete Chapter 2, it throws you into the bonus stage of Iki, an infamously bad action game that Sunsoft had published a year earlier. You have to catch all of the rice balls that are being thrown in order to continue on to the next chapter. And the only things that you can do are move left and right. He throws out 20 rice balls, and you have to catch them all, but at least he always throws them in the same pattern, so you'll get it probably after 4 or 5 tries. One more positive thing I've got to say about Dead Zone is that it actually has puzzles. Not especially deep or complex ones, you'll be able to brute force a solution. But a lot of the console adventure games that were released at the time were just storybooks that made you guess the next word every once in a while. You can actually solve a lot of the obstacles put in front of you in Dead Zone. In Japan, Dead Zone isn't well remembered, but it definitely has its fans. A lot of people got really attached to the story at a young age, particularly the ending. And of course, everyone mentioned the synthesized voices. It's always hard for me to judge these adventure games, because I have to play with a walkthrough in hand so you're not just watching me mash through the same menu over and over again. But I do think Dead Zone's better than average. You're not missing out if you don't play it, but I do think it's more approachable than most adventure games of the era. That might make it a good entry point to the genre.